All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004. That's Mobile APIs and Frameworks in the summer 2023 semester at Georgian, and it's week 6, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. And last we left off, we kind of installed kind of our modules for registration, log in and log out. We configured everything. Now we need to actually use it. And the last thing we want to do is kind of put it in our routes, right? Because without a route or a route, some people say different things. How do you do this kind of stuff? What does the route look like for registration? What does the route look like for a for login? What does the route look like for everything else? So one thing is, the thing to think about is, is it part of the API? Is it part of the API? And I think in this case we'll make it part of the API for login and register and all that stuff. But eventually down the road we may elect to split this up. Okay. So again, we're going to router.post. Right now, let's think about what the route will look like. It's going to be / something API / register, right? And when we register, it'll be similar to add because we're making a new user for the first time. So this is where we're going to say our function, request, response, and next. And we're going to pass this function into our user registration. So user, and if you don't remember, I don't. If I go to my controller for the movie, we can see that we have a process registration is what we call it, right? So that's what we're going to call it here. So down here, we're going to say process, and you can see that it comes up, process registration, right? And process registration will pass in a request, response, and next object, because all we need to do is when we process registration, it passes the request. The request object itself, remember though, is going to have a form that we need to fill out. Okay? Similar when it comes to processing router.post login, right? And we're going to say a function that has request, response, and next. Let's make sure we have some string around this, okay? And we need to put in the same kind of idea. Okay, there it is. And we're going to process the login, process login, and request, response, and next gets passed in there. And finally, the last one will not be a post. It'll be a router.get, and we'll do a logout. And we'll have a function, request, response, and next, where we process our logout. Process logout. We don't really need to put request, response, and next here, but that's okay. And these are authentication routes. Okay. Again, what we always want to check is any one of these broken? Does it break us? So I always go back to this and see that we're still connected to MongoDB. Now, the test. Here we go. Ready? We know we need a form, and we don't have a form, so we're going to need to use this with our our little postman. Let's bring up postman for a second. Okay. So here's our postman, as it's initializing here. We had a bunch of these little things here, and we need another one. So here's a new one. And the new one is, for now, localhost 3000 /API /register. Now, here's something. We want to always check for failure first before we check for success, because we don't know if it's ever going to fail, right? So here we're not passing any parameters. So it should give us a failure response. Let's try it. Sent. And it gives us a little response that says cannot get API register. Cannot get. Is this the right response we want? Think about it. We're doing a GET request. The answer is no, so that's good. Post request. Let's do a post request now. Ready? Sent. It says success false, user not registered successfully. Awesome. This is what we want. We want response. This is what I set up with our little code to basically give us this information. What is it going to return? A little bit of JSON that tells us that we don't have this stuff right. And when we set up our user interface, whether it's iOS or Android, we get an object. We can read the object from the user interface, and we say, we're getting back a success message that says false, and we're getting back the message itself that says user not registered successful. We can actually use that in our inside of our form in our Android or iOS application. Okay? So this is where we made it so it's false. It doesn't log in. Okay, now what did it do online to our database? Did it do anything? Let's go there. So MongoDB Atlas is what I want to go to. Again, you can use other methods to do that. You can use a user interface for this. I don't. Just going to directly go in there. There we are. And what I want to do is I want to browse collections. And let's see what it did. Look, it made a users collection. And the users collection is actually empty. How did it do that? Because we tried to access and register, it said, hey, I want to register a user. But the user information was blank. And so therefore, it didn't register anything. But it did create an empty collection. And this is different what it does online compared to what it might do locally. Wonderful. Let's make an admin user. All right, so how will this look? So again, if I was going to make a user, I need a form, right, for me to do this. Going back to body, right, we learned that X www form URL encoded is what we want to use here. And these are the key value pairs we want to use. So again, we need to use the username, and we'll say admin, lowercase. We're going to say password. Make sure it's correct. Password, lowercase, is we're going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Then we need a first name and last name. So now again, let's be clear. When we want to do this kind of stuff, make sure that whatever you do when you register, so I go back to our movie.ts, it requires body username lowercase, body email address uppercase, body first name uppercase, and body last name uppercase, but body password lowercase. That's what it requires right now. Now, there's reasons for this. All right, you could have made this all lowercase if you really wanted to. I planned it this way. When I make my form, I kind of do something different with username and password than the rest. That's just me. But I mention it so you understand why, right? So email address would be here. And we'll say admin@example.com, right? And then this one would be first name, which would be admin. And last name, which we're going to leave blank, right? And this should register a admin user if we did everything correctly, right? Let's click send and see what happens. Sent. And it said, not only did we user logged in successfully, but we have this. And take a look at this. So the admin user created when, updated when, here's the ID, this is the salt that we're using, and my friends, this is the hash for the password. You don't see a password here, right? Because the password has been hashed. Online, this is a good example of our registration working. If we look online, and if we look here, and if I refresh, you're going to see now that we're going to have in our collections a admin object, right? Where there's the admin user. Let's try logging in now with the admin user, right? Where our username is admin and our password is 123456. We'll try making a failure first and then success. We always want failure first. Back to here. So now this is our post for registering. We can register any user this way. We know this works, and we know what we've tested, which is the form must have this structure, right? Next, let's do a user.post. We know that this is the case, where we want to do a localhost 3000/API/login, right? And let's just log in with nothing and get a return message. Sent. We should get success false, right? We didn't make it, okay? Now, how about if we add in our body, right? How about in our body, we add in a username that is admin and a password that is 123456. That is the password we use. Let's click send it again and see what happens. Success. And we get this information back out, right? Now, I asked for this information out, okay? It doesn't have to give you this information out, right? But that's what this did. It says, yes, you've got proper credentials. By the way, it created a session that's now been lost, right? Because remember, the session is only specific to a browser. We're not using a browser. So the session is useless. That's why we're not actually doing authentication. Okay? So let's take a look here and see how this looks. So again, back to our Visual Studio Code. And you can see that we were successfully logged in and successfully registered. That's what we did. Okay? By the way, 200 doesn't mean anything. 200 means everything was great both times. We may want to change the response.json to have a status that's different when we're not logging in properly. Like a 401, not authorized, or something like that, okay? Okay, so that is our process registration page and our process login. And the reason why I returned all that information is because I did this. I said, take that user information and output that, okay? We could specify nothing out here at all, but user gives us everything. Maybe we should not send that off. Maybe just do this. User, we have a good message, true, and logged in successfully is also true. And if I try that again, just to hide that message, if I click send, then all you'll see is the message. True, user logged in successfully. Wonderful. Let's make it false, right, by putting in the wrong password, right? So let's put in a username with a password that's 12345667. Wrong password, right user, sent. And it says success false. We've now tested that the username and password strategy works because we know we can do username and password. By the way, when you're doing your little video for in-class exercise 5, it might be good to show this, right, as this is what we're doing, okay? Awesome. Let's put it in again. And if we do that again and press send, you can see again, we can see that we're logged in. This is true. Everything is great. Okay. Let's now do the last one to test the last route out, which is a GET request, where we're doing a log out. So again, it's going to be localhost 3000/API/log out. Right now, this requires nothing, so it's hard to mess this up, right? And if I click send, it should just work. Right? And this is good. Okay? But also, if we did everything properly, here you should see user logged out here. I made a little message appear, right? When we did everything correctly. Okay? And that is all of your endpoints for user login, registration, login, logout. Okay? Couple things to note. This is not going to work unless we have sessions. Okay? Session-based authentication is what we would need for, if we're running a website, right? Or if we're running something like, a web app, right? Something like that, like an app that accesses the, does some kind of stuff like a mobile app, That uses sessions, right? It doesn't need to have an API or something like that. We could also use an API key. That's a different thing. We haven't done that. That's a different strategy that we haven't kind of tackled right now, okay? But that is the first thing. We're going to do that other thing next time. Because this, look, it took us long enough just to get this going. Like I said, we're already at 10 o'clock. And we're good to go. Let's put this up on GitHub as, and let's see, did we make any changes first of all? I don't think we did. I think everything is the same. And by the way, whenever you want to check to see if there's any changes that we've made, how do you do that in GitHub? What's the command? Do you guys know? Yep. Git status. And if there's any changes, it'll show it. Like right here, there is changes, right? So we're going to say git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say implemented authentication version 1. Okay. But you should always be able to go and do a git status and see if there's anything else. Here's something else that happened. Notice that it's looking at ICE 3, and there's changes from ICE 3 in here, right? That's something that happened. Maybe there's something that I modified in ICE 3 for this one, and then it's not going up there. I don't care about ICE 3, so I leave it alone, right? But you could, do another change for this one. All right. So now that we have all this ready to go, we want to put this up on render.com because this is only local. If I go back to my render.com site, so if I go to render.com, right, and if I look at my dashboard here, and if I look at my MDEV1004, this one, right, my live site, and you can see that this is what we have on render, right? So I'm going to go to my render site for a second. Sometimes it takes a second to kind of access, right? Then, because what's happening is it puts it to sleep.
That's why it was faster outside Georgian village.
For sure, right? But see how it's putting it to sleep right now, render? It might not even work. Seriously, sometimes it blocks me from render, right?
From here.
Yeah, from here. So it's just really weird. Oh, there it is. See, it says cannot get. This is good. So then what you want to do is you want to go in /API/list, and it should show you this. This is nice. Excellent. Right? But what about if I did a /API/login? It's going to say cannot get. There is no API login because we haven't deployed everything to render. Let's deploy it to render and see if it works too. So again, our strategy is we want to make a separate live site. That's what I've done. I keep these separate from my actual live site. These are my staging area, and then my live site is usually here, live site. Okay. So what I want to do quickly is grab everything from here, right? So I want to grab all this, copy, and I want to go to my live site, which is here, and paste it in. Now, smart thing to do is erase this first. Keep the Git folder, right? That's the way to do it. I would remove everything from here completely, except for the .git folder, because the .git folder keeps track of changes. So we're changing everything is what's happening, right? So if I press paste now, you're going to see that. It's going to paste everything from in class exercise 5, right, in here. And then we should be able to push this up to GitHub. To do this, again, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to drag this. Let's try that again. I'm going to drag this into here. This is our live site, right? And I'm just going to say, this also gives me a README and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to go git add dot. It's going to add all those things in. Git commit -m, and I'll say second version of live site. And so now what this is going to do is, if I did it properly, it should, on render.com, it should trigger, right, a build, right? So if I go back to my my dashboard, you can see that there's a deploy in progress right now. Okay, that's what's happening. So you can always look at the deploy in progress, right, to see what's happening. You can always watch the deployment. I recommend you do so. Take a look at this. Sometimes what happens is weird things happen and things don't complete, like this, right? So what happened? Why did this fail? It says error mongoose 7.21. The engine node is incompatible with this module. Expected 14.20. Whatever. Got 14.17.0. Why? How come? It worked last time. Let's take a look. Back to this. So, weirdly, for whatever reason, we did not put in, I forgot, I removed the engines. Engines is not here, right? We need to specify engines here. So usually I do that here. So if I do engines, this is something I forgot. I could have probably left this in, or I could probably put this in my other package. It's actually not a bad thing to do, right? Then what we want to do is, yes, we want to do that. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. So control space, we want to put a node, and we want 20.2.0 in here. And we also want to put in npm, and we want to put in the version of npm, and I don't know what it is. Let's check. npm minus version, npm minus version, which is 9.66. And we also want to check yarn, please. Yarn. So we know what that is. Yarn minus version, which is 1.22.9 in my case. 19. Now that we have this, we're going to copy this exactly what Robert said, because we forgot to do this last time. Copy these things. It's not going to hurt us to put it back inside of thing. I'm going to save this first. Save. And I'm just going to drag and drop, before I put this up on GitHub, so I want to watch it. I want to drag and drop ICE5 in here just to modify that change, that package.json. Just before I forget, because I will forget. And that's going to go again just before, look, there's even a space there for me, right? It's going to go right here, okay? Save. And I'm going to go git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say modified package.json. And that's to our in-class exercise 5, okay? Again, what you always do is node mon to test it, to make sure there's nothing broken, right? You don't want it to break right here, which is good, right? So no, it didn't break. Next, let's try that back. Now that we have that, we've updated that, let's try that back on our live site. And we're going to say updated package.json, which is what we did last time. So we're going to say git add dot, git commit -m. I'll say fixed package.json, just so we have something different. Git push. And when we do that, if I go back to render.com, and if I go to dashboard, it's going to show deploy in progress, which we can watch the deploy. And it should show us, by the way, render.com sends me emails saying your deployment failed. I don't know if you ever got that email, right? Which is, I love it, right? Because even Heroku never sent me those emails, right? Until later on. And we have it built in here. All right, so this didn't work. What happened? Okay. It says the engine yarn is incompatible with this module, expected 1.22.19, got 1.22.5, right? So in other words, online on render, it doesn't have anything greater than 1.22.5, right? So let's put that in. Let's change yarn to 1.22.5 for render. So 1.22.5, or don't even mention it. One of the two. Don't even mention it. Right? If you're gonna mention yarn, like don't even mention. Just do one of these. So we'll use whatever yarn version it has. Save, right? And we'll say git add dot, git commit -m, we'll say removed yarn version. Let's see what this does. Again, I'm showing you the most common issues where people get stuck. They're like, I don't understand how to do this. Just remove the yarn version. Let's see what happens, right? And you can play around like this. You can do these things over and over again, right? So let's go back. We'll go back to dashboard. We're going to see there's another deploy in progress. We're going to go back to this next deployment. It's going to send me another message that says, you failed, right? Your deployment failed. It's okay. I'm not upset, right? Let's see this. We want it to work, right? So let's see what this does. This is a good sign. This is a really good sign. And it says good, we're good. Build successful. Okay, so now we're going to click on there. It's going to take us to this thing. It's going to give us an error. I like that. And we're going to say /API/list. That still works. We didn't break anything. And then we're going to say /login. I want to get an error. Now, why did it give me this? Because this shouldn't be the error we get. We should get a little JSON file that says it's an error. Why do we get this? It's a stupid error, by the way. Do you know why we got this?
No.
Caching. So let's take this whole thing, and that's why I always have, that's why I always have more than one browser that I can use. So like down here I have, if you notice Firefox, I use Firefox as a backup for caching purposes to make sure that it's not me, that it's caching. So here I have Firefox, I'm putting it into another browser and press enter, and we should be able to get something better than this. Cannot get, all right? So this is interesting. Did I make something go wrong? Why didn't this work? How come I can't do this? What's the problem here? I'm doing a GET request from the browser. It's actually correct. The reason why this is happening is because I need a post request, and I can't do a post request from the browser. I need to do it through Postman. Let's do it. Right? I'm pointing this out there because people will try this out. The one thing that might work is log out. That might work. If I do a log out, that's a GET request, that'll work. But I can't do a post request this way. So, knowing that, this might be actually good, right? No problem. Let's pull this up and let's modify our, kind of login request. Let's go here, and we're going to go to the post login request, and we'll make it wrong, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And instead of being localhost 3000, right, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste the stuff from here. So we're going to grab all of this part, right? And we're going to put that part before the API, right? So that's all this part. Make sure you don't have a double forward slash. There we go. Okay. And we can see that I've got the right credentials, but the wrong login information. Sent. We should get an error that says false, which is correct. This is good. Now let's log in correctly, and we should get we should get true back. And now we're communicating properly with the server, with render. Okay, that's it for today. That's what I wanted to do. We pushed everything up. We have our endpoints ready to go for the next time. So next steps that we've got everything ready to go. I'm just going to mention this to you guys so that you know where we're sitting. We've pushed things up to, things that we've done today is we've pushed things up to render, right? So just like kind of what I wanted to do here at the bottom. We added authentication. We tested our authentication with Postman, and finally we'll update our build to push our API to render.com, which we did. Everything is good to go. Now, next week, let's talk about next week one more time, just to say this one more time. I'm going to send a note to you guys because next week there's no lecture. It's a mid-semester test. So that means I'm just going to give you a document, and my expectation is by the end of the week, you'll have it. It'll open on Monday, this time, close on Friday, midnight. You have the entire week to get it done, right? Totally a lot of time. It'll be very, let me put it this way, eerily similar right, to things we've already done, okay? With maybe a data set change, like something like, hey, maybe it'll be a book list that I want, favorite book list, or maybe it'll be some other kind of thing that I want you to do. But whatever it's going to be you putting together some data, and now the user model is going to change, right? So be prepared for the user model change. Sorry, not the user model, the data model, whatever that data model is going to be, which means some of the APIs might change as well, right? Because instead of doing something else, I may ask you to do something specific. There might be one part that I ask you to do, like for example, delete by ID or something weird, or I don't know, some other weird thing that I might ask you to do. It will be an extrapolation of what we've already done. And here's something else that I want you to think about. There might be a bonus. I always offer a bonus sometimes on these things, especially on midterm, because people are suffering with people having submitted their in-class exercises and they haven't done their assignment properly and they want a little bit of a bonus. The bonus will be very small, but the bonus work will be large. This is what I normally do. So most people, here's what I expect you to do. If you've already got great marks, you don't need the bonus, right? If you're worried about your marks for some reason, do the bonus. I won't accept the bonus unless you did all the major work first. So all the regular work has to be done. If you give me the bonus and the regular work hasn't been done, I'm not going to accept the bonus. There won't even be a bonus opportunity for you, right? You need to have everything 100% working in order for you to get the bonus. The bonus is on top of everything else, right? So what is the bonus? If I'm going to give you something, it's usually something like this. Hey, ChatGPT, I want to build an iOS user interface for a web API. We haven't done it yet. We haven't talked about it. But you can do a little bit of research and put some, your API inside of a table view. How do we do that? Kind of thing. That might be something that I ask you guys to do. And you can use anything you want to get it done. ChatGPT, you can use Stack Overflow, you can use prior stuff that you've done before. But it makes sense. This is our next step. We want to definitely display this in some kind of application. We haven't done an Android or iOS application. We've just been talking about APIs this entire time, which is really the focus of this course, right? But we need some kind of user interface in the second half. So I'm going to build it with you anyway. Be preemptive. Think about what this might look like. I might ask you to do something like either in iOS or Android, build a simple table that displays a list of the things that you're doing, right? How do you connect to it? So here's an example in iOS that I got from ChatGPT. It said basically, I asked it, here's my question. Okay, I meant movies from a web API. Can you provide the code to connect to a web API? Okay, so it says, okay, here's my UI kit. And it says, I'm going to make an IB outlet for a table view, right? And we're going to use, if you guys are familiar with iOS, I'm hoping you are by now, we're going to probably use a regular table view cell. No custom table view cell required. For us, we might make it custom table view cell when we do the example, if we're doing iOS, right? And then it says we're going to have this fetch data method that basically uses the button, the UI button, to fetch the data somehow. Okay, this is interesting. And then what it says is, so fetch data is going to be input text is input text field.text, and this is if it's empty. Else, if it's empty, it says return nothing. This is an IB action for some kind of button. Call your web API using input text to fetch data. Update the movie array with the fetch data. Do we really need this? The question is, the answer is probably not. We can probably do that in your view did load. When your view did load, or if you think about the Android side, when you do your create event, then it's the same thing, right? So now, fetch movies, how does this work? We need some kind of API key. We don't have an API key, right? And it says URL string is whatever the API is, blah, 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 blah. There's the API endpoint, right? It's pretty simple, right? And then you do something like guard let URL equal to URL with this URL string. There it is. And then else, if there's a problem, print some kind of invalid URL. I mean, it's that simple. We just use the URL built into iOS to do it. Now, we need to make a URL session. Oh my God, a session, which we already have done. We have already done all the URL stuff, right? So now this is where we have to kind of think about this. It says we need a shared data task with a URL, okay? And it says two things. We want to pass in the data, right? This is the stuff we're going to get back, some kind of response, and an error if we're going to get it. And basically that's the callback function. That's what that is. And we're saying, okay, handle the response and error appropriately. If let error, if we have an error, then print out the error to the thing. Otherwise, let's see if we have data. If we have data, great. If we don't, print out an error saying invalid data received. Okay, now if we pass this point, we haven't got any errors. We've got everything good. Now we're going to do catch. We're going to try to use the JSON decoder that's built into iOS to store everything, to create a decoder object, right? And we're going to say self movies, which is this movies array. Here's an example of the movies array, of type movie. We don't know what that type is right now, right? Whatever that type is, of type movies, right? We're going to say that we're going to try using the decoder to decode the movie itself, right, from the data. That's a beautiful thing. That one line basically takes the movie, decodes it in JSON format, and saves it in the movie object, right? That's what it does. It actually appends to the movie object. That's what it does, all right? And then it says, now this is interesting, it says update the table view on the main thread. It says dispatch queue main async. I mean, yes, you could certainly do that, but you can also just do something like just reload. Reload data will do it as well. And then once reload data happens, it'll load the table with the data that you get in, okay? Okay. Now, the reason why they're using a task resume here is because they're doing a kind of an async function, okay? Back to this. We have a table. Because we're using a data source and delegate in our UI kit, right? We count the number of movies inside of the array to show how many rows we have in the table. And this is using a default table view cell with an identifier called movie cell. Again, you can call this whatever you want. And then what we're going to say is let movie equals to movies index path row. That's the whatever the movie at the movie. And then we're going to say cell text label text is equal to the movie title. And then cell detail text label is equal to the movie. And in this case, they have something called release year. We would have other things in here. But for the most part, guys, it's it. I mean, that's a simple way of doing it. We just haven't had a chance to do it with, with UI kit and all that kind of stuff. What it talks about, though, it also talks about having a movie struct, right? Because we need a model class. Without the model class, how do we know what movie it is? This is where we put all the details for the movie in here. So, for example, things like, title, studio, all that stuff we have in there. This is where it would go. So we'd have some kind of thing that you would need. That's it. I mean, it's that simple. To fetch data. To do the rest of the stuff, we need to use the APIs, right? We must need something like, hey, if I'm going to use the API to do this kind of stuff, right? Then the API itself, notice there's no place in here, I just wanted to also mention this, there's no place in here that really used the API key. Take a look, all right? So the API key is here, and the URL string, okay, this is kind of an interesting thing. We actually inject the API key in here, okay? That's what it does, because it uses an API key, okay? But what we may use is, instead of using the API key, we might use username and password, where we have some kind of session. So if you wanted to try that, and we say, instead of using an API key, let's use username and password authentication strategy. Login, sure. But I mean, I'm saying it's like, it's really that simple. It's not like that difficult for you to get it done, guys. And I think now it's easier than ever with ChatGPT. Like, it really is, right? I'll do that here. So instead of, I didn't have that in there. So instead of an API key, let's use username and password authentication strategy. See what it does? Sure, look at that. Okay, so it says, here's our fetch movies, right? And there's our movies request. And then our URL requests. We have a username and password. Look at that. We would get these from where? From our form data, right? There's our login string. And then it says, let login data, login string dot data, right, is equal to the string, URL and code. And we're going to send it over. Here's our URL session. And it says with data. And then where does it send off that username and password? It's probably going to be somewhere over here. Right? If login data is good, right? Where that's it. For header field. For header field, look at that. Authorization. If the authorization is true, this is good. So this is something we'd have to check with Postman. What does the authorization field look like, right? And so we can check this out. But you can see that it's not impossible for us to do that. Or we can simply say something like, okay, now let's code this without authorization or authentication, our API endpoint for listing a movie, or showing the movie list, displaying the movie list is, and you can put in whatever you want, right? Localhost 3000 as an example, API/list. And it'll literally code it for you, right? So I think this is where, we can really, kind of like, look at that. We can really, this is not correct actually, right? It's because it's a HTTP. We want to make a post request, kind of thing. Or this is a get request, right? And you can see the query. We can reform this. We know we can make it whatever we want, right? There is no query string for fetch movies at all, right? But fetch movies is interesting because fetch movies basically allows us to use the same thing to fetch any movies, right? So this is fetch all movies, right? So we can make multiple things on the front end to do the same thing. You can see that there is no API in here at all. There's no API key. So guys, I don't think this is too hard. And if I say, okay, now show me the same thing with Android using a recycler view. I mean, like, it's dumb easy nowadays. I don't think it's not going to be that difficult, right? Oh, look at this. We have to do this in we don't want to use Groovy. We can.
So for submission, let's say the bonus thing was this, and
fine.
You would implement that.
Yeah, good.
And they decided to use Android.
Fine.
So you'd include it in, I would assume, the video showing that.
Yeah, show me you got it working, and whatever. Say show me Android and iOS or iOS working. Yeah. Maybe I even give a smaller extra bonus for both. Do both, right? Both little apps. See what they work like, right? But I mean, take a look at this, man. It's not that difficult. Look, they even give you the linear layout for a recycler view. It's dumb easy. It does, even if you don't know how to do a recycler view, they give it to you, and they give you in Kotlin whatever you need. There's your movie, right? And you can actually give them what you want. Okay, now, no, the movie class should be this, and give me all the properties. And then, okay, here's the bundle. Here's your app compat activity, and then there's your onCreate function. And then, okay, let's connect to the thing, and here's all the code. Guys, it's a no-brainer now, all right? It's a no-brainer. There's no reason why you guys shouldn't be able to make use of our API here with Android, right? So, to me, I mean, like I said, it's pretty simple. All right. How are you doing with that? You're okay with that?
Yeah.
So if I ask you for any of that, you should be okay. That kind of stuff. It won't be required for the midterm test, but I think it's a great practice for you for the second half, where we're going to implement this almost exact same thing, right? Just like this. We'll just use. I'll probably start with iOS, and then we'll do the same thing on Android, and we'll compare the two. Talk about the compare and contrast, and we're going to need to do that because we're going to move into Firebase next after this, I think. Okay. All right, that's it for me today, guys. Good luck for your in-class exercise 5. I'd recommend starting your assignment 2, which is basically in-class exercise 5 with your own data, right? And it'll be great practice and review for your mid-semester test, which is starting next week on Monday, a week from today. And that's it for me. I'll stop recording this.